So I wanted to talk with you guys about why I decided to go to law school and how I decided on what law school to go to. I know that those are two big things that all of us who go through the law school process and ultimately become lawyers have to sort of think about and figure out at the very beginning stages. And it's not always clear. And there's a lot of reasons that aren't good reasons to go to law school, and there are also a lot of reasons that are not good reasons to apply to certain law schools. So I'm going to share my story with you guys, and hopefully that will help shed some light on maybe the process that you're going through and some of the questions about your own journey at this point in time. So the first time I probably ever heard of law school as a potential career path for myself, which sounds ridiculous even saying it that way, would be probably when I was around 7 to 13 years old. And I remember either my dad or my mom kind of making one throwaway comment about, oh, you really like to argue, you should be a lawyer. Now, I know that we have all heard that at some point in our lives, and it's just so incredibly cringy to admit it because it's such a ridiculous statement to make. And most of the time it comes from people who are not lawyers who say it, and it's not their fault. It's just something that's kind of seeped into our culture and something that has become kind of acceptable to tell kids and to tell people in high school and maybe even in college. But the fact that you are vocal or opinionated or like to argue is not a good reason to go to law school, and no one's going to take you seriously if you ever say that in earnest. So please, God, never put it in a law school application, like personal statement. Don't ever bring it up in a law firm interview. And if you ever are going to say it to someone sort of at a networking event, always do it with eye roll energy so that they know that you know that it's just totally ridiculous and hopefully humorous at this point that any part of that has led to any of us actually going to law school. The next time that law school popped up on the radar for me, which means the first real time that it kind of entered my consciousness, was in college. And so I went to college at St. Edward's University, which is a small private college in Austin, Texas, and I was a political science major. And so I remember meeting with my career counselor freshman year, and she recommended that I apply for an internship with the Texas legislature because Austin, of course, is the capital of Texas. And so I did, I applied, and I wound up becoming sort of like a policy analyst intern type. And I would do things like meet with constituent groups and sort of research different laws and make talking points for committee meetings and floor debates. And I loved it. I was just so incredibly in love with the work and the energy. And I actually wound up interning for the 4 years of college. So if you had asked me at any point during those first few years of college, what was I going to do after graduation, the answer probably would have been work full-time as a public policy analyst, either for a Texas rep or a Texas senator. But what started to shift for me during that time was that there were a lot of lawyers in the Texas Capitol. A lot of the reps and senators themselves had gone to law school. A lot of the legislative directors and chiefs of staff were lawyers. And even the sort of interns and sort of junior analysts were either in law school or had recently graduated from law school. And so I found myself really surrounded by lawyers and law students. And so those kind of conversations started to seep in, and I started to get a little bit more curious about what that looks like and what that experience was, and was it necessary for me to do that in order to come back and work in public policy? And so I found myself in my junior year of college, and I had heard about law school from enough people and been around enough lawyers that I figured I should check it out and see if it's for me. And so my understanding of what you did next was to sign up for an LSAT Prep course. And so that's what I did in January of my junior year. So that second semester, I signed up for the closest LSAT Prep course I could find, which was located literally across the street from the university. And from there, everything just sort of fell like the domino effect. So in case it's helpful, I want to give you guys some hard numbers. So I signed up for the LSAT Prep course in January of my junior year with the intent to take the LSAT in June of the summer after my junior year, so about 5 months to prep. I had gotten, I think, like a 153 to a 155 on my diagnostic LSAT. And so I think at that time, the promise or expectation was you could go up 10 to 12 points if you did sort of the full 5 to 6 month prep course and treated it kind of like a part-time or full-time job. And so in my practice exams, I was scoring around a 163 to a 168 as it got closer to the test day. And so my target LSAT score was a 165. And so in June, I took the LSAT, felt good on the day of, and I wound up getting the score back and it was a 160. So I was actually pretty disappointed and pretty bummed out about that. And so I remember kind of thinking through and not really taking a lot of time to decide this, but I was going to plan to take it a second time in September. And sort of a pro tip for all of you guys who are thinking about taking the LSAT or currently taking the LSAT, I do really recommend that you sort of mentally and sort of from a time period standpoint, expect to and prepare to take the LSAT twice just so that you can put yourself in the best possible position to get the highest LSAT score that you can. So aside from that. So I had decided at that point to take the September LSAT, but the complicated thing about this was that I was actually on the volleyball team all 4 years of college. I had been recruited to actually play at that university. And so in September, we would have been full on in season mode. And so I actually had to go to the head coach at that time. I think it was about a month before. So in August when we were in our two-a-days, and ask him, would he be willing to let me take the LSAT in September? And so we looked at the schedule and we actually had an away game that weekend, I think somewhere in Arkansas. He basically said, I will let you take the LSAT that day because the LSAT is a morning test. I think it starts around 8 or 8:30 a.m. I will let you take the LSAT that morning if you will still play in the match that evening. Of course, I said yes, not really thinking anything of it. With that, I went ahead and signed up for the September LSAT in a testing center as close to this like random college in Arkansas that I could find. And I did. I sat for the LSAT that morning and I played in our volleyball match that evening. And I don't think I did well, at least on the volleyball match side, but I did it. And I wound up getting my score back and it was a 165. So I didn't kind of exceed my own expectations or kind of get a few extra bonus points, which is what I was hoping for, but I did have the 165. And so I was pretty content at that point to kind of end the LSAT study cycle for myself. And I had taken, I guess at that point, 8 months from like the very beginning of prep all the way through this second LSAT. And so I decided to go ahead and apply with the 165. So now that I had made the decision to apply to law school, the next question became, where do I apply to law school? And at that time, I didn't really have an understanding of the law school rankings or job opportunities or anything like that. The main thing that was sort of just ingrained in my brain was this sort of mentality that I got from my dad, which was, in terms of going to school, college or grad school, you can get a really great education in Texas and do it cheaper in Texas than you can if you go out of state. And so that was 100% what I was focused on and what my priority was when I applied to law school. And I lived in Texas my whole life pretty much, and I really liked it there. And so I didn't really have sort of this burning desire to leave or go somewhere else. Kind of with that in mind, I applied to the University of Texas, SMU, and Baylor. And the only other school that I did apply to was Notre Dame, because in a very weird sort of twist, Notre Dame was apparently founded by the same order of priests that founded the university that I went to. I think either I was told by a pre-law advisor or maybe it was just kind of common knowledge that if you applied to grad school or law school at Notre Dame, you had a better chance of getting scholarship money because they tended to favor people from other institutions that were connected with that order. I'm not really sure if that's true, but that was what I was told. And so those were the 4 law schools that I applied to. Sort of caveat pro tip, what I have been told since is that 12 to 15 is actually a really solid number of law schools to apply to, but I didn't know that at the time, so I just chose those 4. In terms of when I applied, I must have been told by someone about the advantages of early admission because I'm pretty sure I had sent in all of my law school applications by October, November, December of that year in order to be considered for, early admission. And I don't remember the timeline exactly, but I think I started to hear back from law schools around January, February of the next year. I had gotten into SMU. I had gotten partial scholarship money to Notre Dame, I had gotten a full ride to Baylor, and I had gotten waitlisted at the University of Texas. And that's the one that really hit home. I was really bummed about University of Texas because I knew enough to know that that was my first choice. And I also thought that I was really competitive to get in because I remember that the LSAT median at that time was a 166, and so I thought with my 165 I would be a strong candidate. That one really stung, and so at that point I was trying to figure out what my next steps were going to be. And so at this point I had the 3 acceptances and the 1 waitlist from University of Texas, and so I decided to go on an official visit to Baylor and see if the full ride was something that I wanted to go ahead and accept. And so I remember when I got there, the first sort of reaction that I had was, for those of you guys who don't know, Waco's a very small town. And I don't think I'd ever been to Waco at that point, but I had been to small Texas towns. It wasn't the first time. But I just remember coming from living in Austin for the last 4 years and what just an amazing city and how much I had fallen in love with it. The idea of going to a really small town was something that I had a lot of resistance around. And then the actual visit itself, I remember that I had met up with a friend of a coworker, and he was in his 3L year at Baylor, and he was so miserable. And I do not mean to suggest that this is in any way sort of representative of everyone who goes to Baylor, but he was in a really, really negative energy about the law school. And the main thing that he kept saying was, apparently at Baylor, at that time when you were a 3L, there was this very intensive moot court training that everyone was required to do, even if you didn't want to go into litigation. And so he was just sort of going on and on about how much preparation there was and these long nights, and he was like using all his weekends, even as a 3L. And anyway, so that pretty much tainted that entire experience for me. And I walked out of that visit really convinced that Baylor was off the table. And so after that, I was kind of left with a partial scholarship to Notre Dame, no scholarship to SMU, and a wait list at the University of Texas. And at that time, I don't think I was realistically considering Notre Dame. Again, I applied because I was told that there was a relationship between the universities. I just didn't really sort of conceive of leaving Texas at that time. I had a sort of very narrow tunnel vision around that. And at that time, I was leaning University of Texas, even though I was on the wait list, because SMU was a private university and a private law school, and so was insanely more expensive than the University of Texas, which is a public university and a public law school. At the time, sort of pro tip, caveat, what I would have told my previous self, I didn't know that there was anything that you could do in order to get yourself off of a wait list. I didn't know that there were any strategies or tactics or conversations to be had. So for those of you guys who haven't started the process yet or have already been told you're on a wait list, definitely go check out this video that I did with Anna Ivy, and she really breaks down the steps that you can take in order to help get yourself off of the wait list. So just FYI, note to my former self. And at that time, it was about March. And I don't remember exactly when the deposit deadlines were coming due, but I feel like it was getting pretty close to that point where I had to make a decision, or at least I felt like I did. Around that time, I was getting a lot of just physical mail, things like promotional materials or invitations to apply to law schools, things like that. I didn't actually see this sort of simple white envelope for several weeks. And so I remember opening this thing weeks later and realizing that it was an application to apply for a scholarship at SMU through the Hatton W. Sumner's Foundation. And when I looked at the sort of application notice, I realized that the due date was that day. It was a Friday, and I just freaked out because the scholarship was a full ride scholarship. I remember just like having this mini panic attack and just like desperately looking through like what were the things that they were requiring, and could I pull like rec letters from other law school applications and like personal statements I already had written, and my resume and all of these different things, like just wildly aggressively trying to get all this stuff together. And I remember one of the specifics around this application that I didn't have on hand was a passport photo. And so I had to like race to Walgreens and get this passport photo and like have, attach it to the application and get it all in this, manila folder or whatever, and drive to FedEx. And I got to FedEx, and I kid you not, I'm not making this up, they had just picked up the last FedEx delivery for the day. I just started crying. I just broke down in tears in my car in the parking lot of FedEx. And I was like, that's it. I missed the opportunity. I missed my chance. I'm gonna be forever on this wait list and get rejected at the University of Texas. And then I'm gonna have to go to SMU for full price, which is gonna destroy my bank account. And I was just beside myself. And I remember that I had called my sister, who was an actress in LA at that time, she still is, and her day job was working as a recruiter. And so I was kind of talking to her, just sort of sobbing on the phone. And she goes, Angela, it's fine. These deadlines are made up. You can absolutely go ahead and mail your application tomorrow, and then just write them an email and explain the situation and let them know that your application's coming. It's gonna be fine. I kind of half believed her, but not really. But I went ahead and mailed it and sent the email, and sure enough, on Monday, I get a response back from, the administrative assistant saying, yep, we just got your application in the mail, you're good to go. So I don't really know what the lesson is there, but in case any of that happens to you guys, those deadlines really are made up. And so always reach out and explain the situation, and you're probably gonna be fine. So long story short, they wound up accepting my scholarship application. They actually invited me to interview. It was a 3-day interview process for this scholarship. I wound up getting the scholarship. And so with a full scholarship in hand from SMU, I decided to accept, and I took my name off the wait list at the University of Texas. Now, I know that all of you guys are in a unique situation, and not everything is as clear-cut as that decision was for me at the time, mostly because I was ignorant of the other things to consider, if I'm being totally honest. And so for those of you guys who have done your research, have done your prep, have looked at all of these different factors of how to choose a law school, which, by the way, if you're curious what those are, definitely check out this video here. I really break down what to look at in terms of how to evaluate the different law schools that you're applying to. But usually the biggest question I get from sort of aspiring law students is, I either got into a higher ranked law school with no money, and I got into a lower ranked law school with either a lot of scholarship money or a full scholarship. And so the question becomes, which of those two do I choose? And so in the video that I mentioned, I go through what my thoughts on that are, and it's not an easy decision, but there are some questions that you can ask yourself about, for example, where it is you want to live and practice after law school, how much geographic flexibility do you want, what are the different job opportunities that you want to have in terms of the different sectors of the law that you might want to work in, and then of course, how much scholarship money versus student loan debt do you want to take out in order to really set yourself up for financial freedom? And that's a really, really big one, and one that I tend to lean into almost more than anything else. One of the things that I will say in terms of kind of what I learned from this process looking back is, one, the importance of evaluating all those factors and making an informed decision, but I guess also being generally aware of the different cities where you're applying to law school, because one of the things I didn't know at the time was how incredibly strong the legal market was in Dallas. I didn't know that it was a hotbed for law-related jobs. And had I known that, it wouldn't have changed my decision, I guess, but it would have been really nice information to know, because the other thing I didn't know about Dallas at the time was that SMU was the only law school in Dallas. The alumni network was crazy strong. Every single law firm partner practically that worked in Dallas had graduated from SMU. And so there were these pipelines that were already in place just simply because there was no other competition around. So if you can find a law school that has a strong legal market and doesn't have a lot of other law schools in its vicinity competing for that market, you can find yourself a unicorn law school that you might not know have existed. Just to kind of highlight that, in Texas, which is where I went to law school, Dallas is a crazy strong legal market, Houston is a crazy strong legal market, and Austin is a smaller market but very strong for University of Texas students. And so that's just one person's sort of story and what I figured out, but hopefully it has shed some light on this whole crazy process for you guys. And of course, feel free to ask me any questions in the comments that you have. I'm not a law school admissions specialist, but I'm happy to give you my thoughts on, yeah, what else, whatever might be coming up for you guys. And if you're looking for feedback, not just from me, but just other people who are going through the process in real time right now, who are in law school right now, definitely check out our free Law School Network Facebook group. It's filled with over 3,000 law school and pre-law school students, and you can definitely post in there and connect with people who are in law school or living in areas where you are considering going to law school. And so you can get their feedback on the city and the legal market and job opportunities and bar passage rates and all of the really good data that helps you make an informed decision. So I hope this was helpful, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.